Morning everyone, my name's Paul Banks. I'm part of what we fondly refer to as the Jadu gang at Wigan. So I think what's been really exciting about the last few years working with Jadu is that what Jadu work on gives permission to innovate and creative. And I think personally speaking, reaching the mid-50s of my sort of career now, it's probably the most exciting time of it really, I would say, being fair enough, and working with the likes of Sam. Sam is taking a massive lead on developing the highways network management processes, and she's embraced Jadu. So we're here today to tell the story about Jadu.
So I'm Samantha Cross, I'm the business manager within the Highways and Network Management Service. So before we get into the Jadu integration and give a bit of detail around that, I think probably most of you around here don't know Wigan Council that well and what Highways and Network Management are about. We have 112 staff within our service that deliver the planned maintenance, the traffic management, the street works, the operational services, that's around drainage, winter maintenance and our minor works, street lighting, that type of function, and then we've got our digital print and reproduction offer as well. Within my service we support the whole environment there, and that's leading on the customer contact, the customer engagement, the digital enhancement, performance within the service and the operational work delivery plan. Everyone relies on the highway, whether you've all got here today on public transport, but you must have walked here, driven here. Everybody uses it for work or school. Obviously, when you're waiting for that delivery, whether it's your delivery of goods or services, they've come on that adopted highway, and also the emergency services around the borough. We've got a political interest, and I think that'll be the same at every council, because obviously the condition and the access around the adopted highway is really important to them politicians, especially in the local government when they're funding our adopted highway and that adaptation. To our MPs and our councillors, it's very important. We get a hell of a lot of contact, which is quite important when you come down to your service, that we've worked together quite well, because we get a hell of a lot of demand around our members and MPs. Last one on this is around reputation. We know social media is quite a big thing at the moment, and the first thing they want to do is to call that pothole that, oh, my house is flooding because they've not done what they needed to do. We get a high lot of perception around what our highway services are not doing. So I think for me, everybody relies on the services, the good highway that they go to, but what they don't want to be done is held up in that work being done on the highway. Also, we get them keyboard warriors around what they expect to be happening. What they don't really understand is the political element, the funding element, but they determine that they are important to us. So it's making sure the perception is either, is it a perception or is it a reality? So at this point then, we needed to make sure, we needed to bridge the gap between that kind of thing, and I think that's what James spoke about before around what did our residents want. So I'll take you back to 2015. I think this is where a couple of questions have come up today around what was your journey. As you can see on here, there's quite a lot, and I think the deal has come out with James's subjects as well around what came for us and why we needed to do it. And one of the things on here was around getting online. And I think for our service, it's one of the big gaps at this point. But just to give a bit of context, if I go to why we changed as a service, the DFT self-assessment, so that was the local government incentive funding, changed at this point. And what us as a service needed to do is start to meet a criteria on 22 questions. In them 22 questions, we had 4 elements around customer engagement. So this is where we started to shift change. And I know James mentioned before, but for us as a highway service, that was really, really important, because that's where we were getting our funding from local government. So some of the questions that we had was around, we needed to communicate why asset management was important. So that meant, what are we doing, why are we doing it, and when are we doing it? So that's where we needed to change some of the stuff we were doing, and I'll go through some of this in a minute. We needed to engage the customer satisfaction of understanding what stakeholders actually wanted, and gaining feedback. So not only was it we was delivering a service, we was understanding whether that service was the right service, and again that perception and reality, and getting them lessons learned around what people really wanted. The last question was very much around informing our residents around what was going on, and this is where the real shift change started to do, because when you start doing that brainstorm, you can get this, your media plans involved, you can get your planned notifications on the website, so you understand that we get letting everybody know. But one big gap that was missing, and this is linked to the deal, was getting residents online. So this is where we had a contact centre. At this point now, in 2015, every single resident was ringing the contact centre, and I've just told you how busy this must be. Every ward member was ringing that contact centre. Every single call that was put through, we had a work ticket, a paper work ticket that came through to our service. It was printed on one of them old-fashioned printers, you can imagine. It got put up, it got in and out tray, it then got picked up by that highway inspector, went out, little notes, ringing back that resident. At this point we knew that there was a gap, and obviously it came with its limitations around pieces of paper going missing. Couldn't understand whether that resident even was satisfied with what they've got told, because we didn't even have that audit around what was actually happening. So at this point now, the corporate push was getting things digital, and that, again, I keep going back to the deal, but that is the drive, we need to get it digital. So this is where corporately we had a different conversation, and I was going in this workspace, the DFT are asking me, this is what we need, and then obviously the deal's here, what's on offer. So going into corporate Wigan, we had something called the Report app that came available to us, and this was launched, and we really embedded this in 2016. It was a real shift change for us, so I'm going to touch into what that it did, and then the limitations as well. So as you can see on the board, I've tried to draft it out as best I can. These are the categories of what we've put in, and then the workflow. I'm not going to explain this, you can go through it, but basically what we had was better triage in the front end, so we removed all these bits of contact from the contact centre, so as you can imagine, every pothole, manhole, curb, drainage, flooding, everything was coming through the Report app, so it was removing that customer contact from the front end and making it digital. But what that did then, we integrated it into our back office system, and that allowed our highway inspectors that were doing the highway inspections, monthly inspections on their handhelds, the accessibility to actually see that inquiry front end on the tablet on site. At this point then, getting to the point where they're going to notify whether it's a defect or no defect. But what this couldn't do is actually allow that highway inspector to inform that resident on site with a picture or tell them what was really happening. So as much as it's got better, great. Someone's given a point location around where they are. We did have limitations around the point location if they didn't have the GPS on, so user error of the Report app. They didn't. I think we had quite a few in Wigan Bank at one point. Pothole in Wigan Bank. I think I got that a good few times. But that was a limitation of the app. It stopped us being a real digital service. But with them limitations, it gave us lessons learned. It did also allow us to have images on there, so imagine the sensitivities around that flooding event, that pothole. We could actually make them real life decisions back office by seeing that informed decision, but there was still that limitation. Obviously this went back to corporate Wigan around what we had, and we brainstormed of what we could do, but that was exactly what the offer was at Wigan. We couldn't change it, and that was where we were getting to. The next bit around this, as you can see at the bottom, the customer contact stops at the defect, no defect. We didn't have the resource to go back to them residents. We couldn't have anybody come ringing back down in operational services. Hi, I've actually done that pothole outside your house. We get too many inquiries each month. We get over 1,000 inquiries at this point. Each month we haven't got the resource to go back one time, say it's a defect, no defect, and then saying the work's been done. And especially when the politicians' side of this, it becomes very heavy and a lot of complaints at this point as well. So you're getting that real vision of what our service is about, and this, obviously the sensitivities. Not only that is we didn't have any performance data around what was coming in, because as you can imagine, if anybody who's worked in highways, there's not everything's highways land. We've got parks, we've got corporate land management areas. If it's a pothole, it's coming through to highways, it doesn't matter. But then we redirected, so we couldn't really get that performance, because some of the triaging element at the front end wasn't happening, so it came really limited on what we were doing. So at this point, we had this until we got Jadu. This is where I really want to set the journey's really shift changed. What that did is allow us to have a different conversation. A better process was drafted. We learned from what this gave us, but actually learned what it gave positively, like the pictures, the triage of what we needed to do. From the customer feedback, we got a lot of feedback from this, not corporately, and from service. We brought all that together before we started doing it, and we actually scoped out what we'd actually like this to look like. And again, I went over to these guys and said, this is what I want, and it was quite a big ask, I believe. I think I came in with, you're thinking, really? But at this point then, it came with its challenges, and we actually got told no a good few times, didn't we, Paul? And I think that's where you want to come in now around what's next. Well,
thanks, Sam. So there was a big challenge there, really. I think Sam came with an ask. What really we wanted with the new system is a system that's going to communicate with the residents at a timely manner when things are actually happening on the front line. When the inspectors are looking at a tablet, making a comment on that tablet, we want that information to get back. But Mayorise is the Irish back office system. If I could show you now, you'd probably feel like we've been transported back to 1997. It's got a very 90s feel to it. And the APIs just ain't there. It can't actually talk to Jadu in a meaningful way. So what we had to do really is look at a sort of an innovative solution to that, which there's going to be a video shortly which will explain how it works, but without being too technical, what we wanted to do is look at Jadu polling the Mayorise system. So what that means is that Jadu, at a set period of time, will talk to Mayorise looking for fields that are changing in that system. So for example, an inquiry could come in, it's been submitted, it has then been inspected and it's been confirmed that it's a defect. If Jadu sees that that field's changed, it brings that back into Jadu and triggers an email out to the residents. Now we were told we couldn't do that, but we actually got that sorted as a solution. Quite a simple solution. Myself, within the Jadu team, we're not technically minded, but it was, quite an interesting sort of revelation. We were working with developers to do this, but I think we'll talk a bit more about this really. It was a very collaborative sort of work. We originally had this process flow, different statuses, isn't it, around the defects being identified and the defects being repaired. But our solution actually was actually quite simple. It actually narrowed that workflow down, and we did have a good bit of a eureka moment by developers, which was quite exciting. What I'm going to do next, this is the process base. This is what you probably saw that network, that highways workflow at the very start in Suraj's presentation. We actually sort of got it down to this. So what was happening, the polling take place, it talked to that Mayorise ticket, brought a field back into the system, and then at certain points would send information to the residents. Now, what we got, I think one of the big problems I think with under the reporting app is that was around the sort of duplicate inquiries coming through. In this system as well, between submitted and in progress, the network management team validated that inquiry to ensure that if it was a duplicate, they could match that to a Mayorise ticket. And when that Mayorise ticket was updated, it would update multiple Jadu cases. So that saved so much time, rather than having to sort of like find out actually what case it reported, what are are these cases the same, for example, and then updating those individual cases. Those days are frankly gone now with the new Jadu solution. This video will talk a bit about what we've done with the system.
Because we
So just a bit of an insight into sort of the way that we work as a team really as we're working with developers. I think what Jadu Local is giving us is a sort of newfound confidence to engage in those technical conversations. We've got something to offer to developers and developers have got something to offer to us, and we've really formed some really strong relationships. And it's helping us really to start learning some of those technical terms as well. So it's actually made the process a lot quicker. I think what we had on the report what Sam was talking about earlier on, is it was a third-party supplier, but it was a report that was what you had. There wasn't any sort of idea that you could change and develop this over time. The advantage with Jadu now is that we would automate those changes. We can iterate really, really quickly. And it's actually sort of conducive, I think, to more agile ways of working. I mean, in the old days, with the report app, you wanted to change, you put that change request in. You'd then get maybe a 5-figure sum back that comes to saying that that's how much it's going to cost for that change, and then it would happen 6 months down the line. With Jadu, what's happening now is that someone will come to me and say, I want this change, and within maybe sort of a day or so, that change is put in place with no big financial sum that's attached to that change as well. I think this final point about it is bringing that sense of realism to digital transformation. You know, this is not flippant comment about AI and robotics. I think obviously that to a degree is the future of local government. But the reality of local government is that we're probably all working with systems that are 10, 20 years old. And it's about how we can bring this new technology in to work with that technology. And that's what's been really exciting about working with Sam and working on this, is that we can actually start seeing differences and changes for the benefit of our residents, but also for the benefits of services and creating those efficiencies that are much sought after.
Right, just to reiterate the last bit of the film in more detail. Obviously when that inquiry does come in, like Paul's just said, it was very much round pinpoint location, which it does do now, but because we've got Jadu doing the front end, we've got that bespoke web form before it gets there. So what that does before it even gets in it validates that inquiry and understands it is for us. So I'll give you an example of that. So from a drainage point of view, we get a hell of a lot of contacts around, especially around leaf fall season, that the leaves have fallen on top of the grid itself and it's blocked. Obviously that would mean our services go out and that's a cost to our services, but by working with Paul, what we've done is triage that, and before it even comes into our service now, it goes through to the cleansing team, for example. So that sends it over to the road sweeping team that will obviously define that road being swept. Once that inquiry does come in, it's saving a lot of officers' time. So within my team, we do the validation, first of all, to do the checks, whether obviously it's a duplicate, they still need to do that triage, whether it's a duplicate, but they can link it straight away. So when I'm saying officer time, it's not people within, obviously Dave's here now, you've seen him on the video, I'll pinpoint him, with his highway inspectors, operational staff, they're not getting that contact, it's coming through to the business support team, so we're supporting that team the best way we can. Dealing with the cost of the whole inquiry is reduced massively, because previously, like I've just said to you, it went through to the highway inspectors. They spent a hell of a lot of time either ringing the resident on the first instance where I've said that they've got them calls, but when it did go down the reporting avenue, it was very much the sitting back behind the desk and typing out every single response to that resident. Now with the standard responses that we've got, with the status updates in Mayrise, what it does do is push that notification to say it's no defect and give a clear definition of what our policy is. If it is, in fact it's a defect, to give clear instruction that we've issued a work ticket and the work ticket will be done within the service standards. As reducing complaints, this is because, as you can imagine before, where the contact stops, it was very much defined, it's closed inquiry. They had to log back into report app to find out what that update was, whether it was the fact we were doing it or not. Because we didn't have the resource in the service to go back to them whether that pothole was being fixed, obviously there was a complaint saying you've closed my inquiry down and it's still not done. They need to log back in to see that it was issued a work ticket, but that is become user error, and it's very much unlikely that they're going to log back in to find that update because they want it there and then. So we have a massive reduction in claims, and it is because they're being kept informed at every single stage of that work, that life cycle of that inquiry. The reduction dealing with duplicate inquiries, that is because, like I said to you, you can link your inquiries together. If it's the fact we can't define that as a back office Triage, we do signpost that through to the highway inspector. They can add notes on that inquiry and define that that is the defect they've picked up either on a previous highway inspection this month, or whether it's an inquiry that's come in. We can then, as admin staff, they actually put it on there and relocate the inquiry and pull it back and drag it back to the actual defect that's in the main rise. And overall, we do get feedback on the back end of our contact. So what we have learned is customer feedback's really important. Not only do we get involved in the NHT survey to make sure that we are getting the best service to our residents, but we do actually ask for customer feedback on all our inquiries. So and it is more around when we have issued the work ticket, not when we haven't, because what we don't want is that bad feedback around faults, because everybody wants everything done, just to make that clear. And lastly, we have saved over 100k in total around this. It is quite new. But from moving from 2015, where I was in the contact centre, through to now, that is the total saving that we've made as a service. Thank you.